Okay, so I'm going to start our recording so it's available for people, and I'm going to share this slideshow presentation on the screen. If you can't see it, you can chime in on your microphone or put something in the chat. I'm going to try to monitor the chat as I talk through the presentation. So if there's something that you want to comment, you can always type it in. I think if you hover, it's probably towards the bottom of your screen, you will see like the little speech bubble with the ellipses. That's what you would click on and type in your comments. In fact, I just sent a little hi to everybody so you can kind of see where that goes possibly. All right, so let me get going with our presentation here. Oh, good, good. You found me. All right, view, presents. Okay, here we are, our first session. I'm really excited to be back to work with you guys. It sounds to me like we had some gains from last time, between last time when we worked together and when you guys took the test again. We haven't quite reached that threshold, that passing level, but that's all right. Little by little, step by step, we'll get to where we need to be, all right? Our agenda for today is to talk about something I call the 4 pillars of skills building, which is basically what to study and how to study. I've been working since we saw each other last on explaining what needs to go into a really solid skills building routine. And the test is just kind of it's not really the end. It's really the start of our career. So the more that you work on building your skills, the closer you'll get to passing that test. But building our skills as interpreters is really something that takes our entire career. We never stop learning. And these 4 pillars are things that we can work on every day of the week, of the work week anyway, to sort of organically, naturally improve the skills that we need and get closer to that performance level we need to be at to be able to pass the test. So that's what we're working on. The practice of interpreting, as I started writing this up, I was thinking to myself, what I'm really describing to you is practice. Not just in the sense of the verb, which according to Merriam-Webster means to perform or work at something so as to become proficient. I'm not just talking about the activity, the verb, the action. I'm also talking about the noun, the act of doing something systematically. Your practice as an interpreter is something that I believe we as professionals need to think seriously about and take seriously, just like we have our, you hear the word used this way, like by religious people, my yoga practice, my prayer practice, my whatever it is. I think artists and musicians do the same thing, is a systematic attention to a skill so that we can learn to do it well. And that's where I want us to put our energy in the next 12 weeks that we're together, is into building this type of system that will help us little by little, day by day, get closer to the level we need to be at to be able to pass the test. All right? And so, as you guys know, I'm Kelly, and I'm going to be with you for the next 12 weeks and in touch whenever you have questions for me. I don't know if I shared last time we worked together that I'm a recovering high school Spanish teacher, meaning that in a past life, I taught Spanish to mostly sophomores, juniors, seniors, which was fun for a while. But once I had little nuggets of my own at home, I needed to be with them more than teaching allowed me to be. Honestly, I got really tired of all the take-home work and everything, and which is why I'm recovering. My little ones aren't so little anymore. I've got a tween, a 12-year-old, and a teen, a 14-year-old. They still keep me hopping. But being a Nebraska, Iowa, and federal court certified interpreter has really allowed me to have a career that I enjoy while being able to balance family life pretty well. And So what I've been concentrating on lately is taking what I know about education, being a former teacher, and matching it to what I know about how to get better at interpreting. And because of that, I'm a dedicated skills builder. I posted on our Facebook group that I'm working this with you guys. I have the calendar that I sent you, and I've been checking off the pillars that I managed to focus on every day. And I encourage you guys to do the same thing. So that's who I am. That's why I'm here. It really matters to me to help my colleagues get from where they're at to where they want to be. And my hope is that it's easier for you guys than it was for me. When I started, I've been interpreting the courts now for 10 years. I have my 10-year work anniversary this year. And I was really surprised by how much hustling and searching and working I had to do to find materials to prepare with, to learn from. And I think the colleagues that were certified in my area before I was had an even harder time. A lot of them just had to go and observe court hearings. They really didn't have anything to use to prepare. So part of my goal is to help you guys along the way with a few fewer bumps and bruises than I've had. That's my hope. So anyway, 4 pillars of skills building. This is where we're going to be focusing our energy over the next 12 weeks. What I'm going to do right now is describe to you guys the ideal, what we're aiming for. I believe in aiming high. You know, that the maxim of aiming high, and then if you fail, you're still a lot further along than you would have been had you said, oh, I think I can do maybe 5 minutes today. You know, if you had aimed for something that felt realistic, you might not even get there. So my philosophy is to know what the ideal level is and do our best to get there, knowing that even when we fall short, we're further along than we would be otherwise. So that's my plan. Your job, you can listen. If listening is the way that you prefer to learn, you can grab some scratch paper and take notes if you need to write things down. Know that I will share this slide deck so that you can refer back to it over the course of our time together. I'll share the recording of this meeting that we're having so you can listen back if you so choose. And you can always ask questions. We'll review it often as well. So my job, tell you about these 4 pillars that I've identified. Your job, write them down, get them in your head, come back and review them as you need to. Here are our 4 pillars. All right. The 4 areas that we want to focus on in a given day, if it's a perfect day, we have nothing in our way of studying, are these things: reading, terminology management, technique, and interpreting. With interpreting, I've given sort of a little bullet points of what I mean, what you need to be doing with your interpreting. You perform it, you could critique it, you repeat it, and I'll get into more detail on that. But the 4, you know, if we envision our careers as interpreters as like a tabletop, the 4 areas that hold up our tabletop are a reading habit, a terminology habit, a technique work habit, and an interpreting work habit, okay? And ideally, we want to focus on all these areas in a day. And I know just as well, you know just as well as I do that not every day is ideal. But again, we're aiming high here. All right. So let me talk to you a little bit by bit, about what I mean with these pillars, okay? The first pillar is reading, like we see here. And my goal for you is that you read or listen to the written word in your weaker language every day, aiming for 30 minutes, all right? Now, the idea of a weaker language can be a little bit hard to pin down. In my case, it's very obvious. Spanish is my weaker language. Why? Because I didn't learn it. I didn't start learning it until I was 15. I learned it in an academic environment. Eventually, I found myself immersed in the language in a Spanish-speaking country. But that was when I was an adult. And so English is always going to be the language that I comprehend and that I go to in, moments of high stress. It's the language that I count in, usually the language that I dream in. For me, it's pretty cut and dry. For other people who have grown up speaking both, it can kind of be difficult to pin down which is your weaker language. Some people are equally proficient or as unproficient in both and need to do some reading work in both languages to bulk up their vocabulary and polish their language skills. But most of us have a clearly identifiable weaker language. If you happen to be a person who grew up in a Spanish-speaking home, you learned your Spanish from your parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, grandparents, but you never really took formal classes in it, then it's likely that Spanish is your weaker language. Even if you can revert to Spanish very easily, you have no trouble counting in it, it can be an unconsciously understood language for you. If your academic background is entirely in English, then consider Spanish your weaker language for the purpose of the idea of the pillars. If you haven't spent a lot of time reading novels or works of nonfiction, newspapers, that sort of stuff in Spanish, then prioritize Spanish as the language you need to be reading and or listening to every day. We're aiming for 30 minutes, but I know parents of kids, career people, you struggle with finding 30 minutes. That's okay. Let's talk about what you should be reading, okay? Read fiction, nonfiction, poetry, literature. It doesn't matter. It needs to be entertaining to you. When reading should be a habit that if you don't already have a reading habit, you start building it now and you take it with you to the grave. You do it day in and day out. And the only way to really be successful at that is to find something enjoyable. So you don't have to feel like, oh, I need to be reading textbooks on forensics in Spanish. I need to be reading, Don Quixote in Spanish, otherwise it doesn't count. Not at all. If all you want to read is People magazine in Espanol, if that's new to you, if reading that source of language is new and it's getting you into a reading habit, then it counts. All right. Whoops. So read whatever, as long as it's entertaining. One way to increase your exposure to the written language, especially in your weaker language, is through listening, okay? Now that you people know how to read, you know how to decode words on the page, you don't actually have to physically read to still be in the habit of reading, as long as you're listening to story and, argument, rhetoric, etc. So if you don't have 30 minutes to sit down and look at a book and go through it, because you've got little kids squawking, you've got a boss who needs you to be somewhere, you've got dinner to make, breakfast to clean up after it, that sort of thing, consider audiobooks or podcasts, newscasts as an option. And again, the maxim of making sure it's something that's entertaining to you is really, really important. But if you don't currently read and believe that you need to start, audiobooks can be a lifesaver. I was a big pleasure reader as a kid. Then I got into high school and college, and because of all the classes I had to take and balancing like my part-time job, I really didn't pleasure read. And before I knew it, my kids were along, and who can sit down with little kids and get through a book? So I didn't get to do that very often until I discovered audiobooks, and I haven't looked back. So there's a couple apps you can download to get audiobooks. You can probably get audiobooks through your library in Spanish. We can communicate on Facebook or email about titles. But listening to the written word is one way of taking advantage of the downtime where your hands are busy, but your mind really isn't. Taking advantage of that to squeeze reading into your day. You don't necessarily need a 30-minute long chunk to get something out of this. You know, if you take a 10-minute morning walk, you can put headphones in and listen to an audiobook on that walk. If you can listen without getting too distracted, then you can listen to an audiobook rather than driving. You know, you can do that over your commute to work rather than the radio. You can use an audiobook while you're making dinner, put it on while you shower, brush teeth. It's really a matter of taking advantage of those little moments where your ears are free and there's nothing that requires your intense attention. To taking advantage of those moments can really add up and help you with your reading. All right. All right. So that's reading. Okay. What questions do you have? Anything? You can add it to me in the chat. Wait a second. Oh yeah. Okay. No questions? We're good? Good. Take like 20 seconds and if you would, on your scratch paper, maybe jot down 1 or 2 of these reading ideas that might be realistic for you. What could fit in for you? Reading for 10 minutes before you fall asleep at night, instead of grabbing your phone and looking at Facebook right away in the morning. Would it work to put a book by your bedside, wake up and read for 5 minutes? Audiobooks at different moments of the day. When can you squeeze reading in? Jot a couple of those possibilities down. Okay, so that's pillar number 1, reading. The reasoning behind reading is that there have been study after study after study performed, and it's pretty conclusive that the more reading a person does, the higher their vocabulary, the better their language fluency. Reading improves writing. It improves thinking skills, and it improves vocabulary. And really, what we need at our disposal as proficient interpreters is a wide, deep vocabulary. We just need to know a lot of words. That's how the job is for us. And reading helps you do it in an unconscious, enjoyable way. So really lean into that habit. It's important, okay? Second pillar is terminology management. And like I was just saying, interpreters need a good vocabulary. We need a good vocabulary. And to get a good vocabulary, one way to go about it is reading and not really worrying about it. The more we read, the more we absorb the language organically and we can just kind of use it. That's how we work. However, as interpreters, because we need to know so many words about so many subjects with no warning at a given time, we also need to attend to our vocabulary actively. We need to actively practice in order to bring all the words that we begin to understand passively through our reading. We need to bring those into our active vocabulary. We need to be able to use them. And in order to help with that aspect of interpreting, we have this pillar called terminology management. Okay? So your goal is to increase your vocabulary by 8 to 10 words a day, 5 days a week. Very high goal. Like I said, I've been working on this with you guys, and I'm probably getting maybe 10 words a week. So I'm not working at the rate I should be, but I'm at least adding some words to my little flashcard pile, okay? So our goal is increasing our words 8 to 10 words per day, 5 days a week, so maximum 50 words a week, okay? And the way we do this is we take new words from our reading and we turn them into flashcards. I happen to still prefer this little analog method of carrying around paper flashcards with me, all right? I have a system where if I get good at the word, you know, I start using the word daily, studying it every day. If I get really good at it, I move it up to Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I only study it on a Monday, Wednesday, or a Friday. And if I get really good at it after that, I only study it every Monday, once a week. And then if that's really easy, then I move it into the once a month pile. But you can get just, you know, that you don't have to do a more complex system like that. You can just make a big pile of flashcards and studying them all every day. So when I make my flashcards, if it's been a while since you were at school and I don't really remember how you did that, I put the phrase in Spanish on one side. So I'm not sure if you can see that or not, because I can't, oh, let me see. Maybe I can see our, yes. All right, like for example, this is mover las piezas. I put that on one side to pull the strings or pulling strings. She pulls the strings in this endeavor, right? So that was, I came across the idiom pull the strings. Who's pulling the strings here? And I didn't know how to say it in Spanish, so I started looking, and once I found a viable rendition, I added it to my flashcards. So when I study every day, I'll study looking at the word in English and making myself say it in Spanish. And then after I've done all my words that way, I flip them over, I see them in Spanish and make myself say them in English. All right, so turn any words that you learn from your interpreting exercises or your reading time into flashcards, hopefully at the rate of up to 10 a day, okay? That's step one. Step two, you drill them daily. You may kind of shuffle your flashcards into an algorithm where you're not, the ones that you know the best, you're not seeing every day, like I described. Or you may not, you may just look at them all every day. That's fine. But drill them. You want to review them. If you want to put your flashcards on your phone, there's lots of apps that will allow you to do that. Quizlet is a great one. Oops. Did this just kick you guys off? Stop share. Sorry about that. My computer tried to update something right in the middle of class. There's lots of apps that will let you learn your words. And that's great. I have noticed in myself that I do best when I am using, you know, like writing things out by hand. It seems to stick in my head better. But if you, there it is. Sheesh, took me a while to find that. If you find that you do better by having it on your phone and you can just remember to pull it up and review your flashcards throughout your day on your phone, go for it. Quizlet's a good app. Anki is another one that's a good app, and I can share those resources with you guys on Facebook. Present. Okay, let me find the page we were on. Oh no, I think you might not be able to see it, huh? Whew. I'm looking for the page we were on. Drill flashcards. Okay, there we go. Now Esther is here. I'm so glad to see you. I'm glad you could make it. And we'll make sure we get Alberto the next time around via email or via Facebook. So drill those flashcards daily. All right? That's terminology management. It's as simple as that. You make flashcards out of new words. You get the new words from your reading or from any interpreting or technique practice you're doing, and then you drill them daily. You can, I don't know if you guys used to call it drill and kill in school. That's kind of what you want to do with your new terminology, because we never know what's going to show up, you know? Do you know how to say Persian rug in Spanish? Do you know how to say maroon in Spanish? Do you know how to say barrette? You know, there's just a lot of random words and phrases that can come up with no notice. And as we get better at thinking, geez, how would I say that in my opposite language, and turning it into something we can drill, the better we'll get at actually being able to convey these ideas when we're interpreting. Okay, that's pillar 2. Pillar 1, reading. Pillar 2, terminology management. I have found that these are the easiest 2 to fit in to a day. Why? Because you can fit them in your edge times, your moments of calm, that, you know, 10 minutes over lunch, you can drill your terminology. As you brush your teeth, shower, make dinner, clean up breakfast, you can be doing audio reading. Those fit easier. What you have to plan for and set a little bit more time aside for are the final 2 pillars of a good skills building practice. And those are technique work and actually practicing your interpreting. All right. So for technique work, there are several different things that you can do. You can jot notes down on these right now, but know again that I'll give you access to this slide deck. So you can come back to this when you're thinking, okay, I've got 10 minutes. I want to do technique work. What is it that Kelly said I could do? I'm going to explain them to you real quick. And then, you know, again, you don't feel like you have to write down every single word. You can come back to this later. So one really good technique exercise is called shadowing. It helps you with your simultaneous interpreting in particular. I noticed that I perform better as an interpreter if I've warmed my brain up, even with just a little bit of shadowing. For me, it works best when I'm hearing my weaker language and shadowing in my weaker language, because it requires comprehension and it requires pronunciation practice. And those things, getting that going, getting those juices flowing, like in the morning or shortly before an event I interpret, really does increase my accuracy time after time. So much so that I need to do it every single time, and I get mad at myself when I don't fit it in. So what you do when you shadow is you hear a message and you repeat it in the same language as you listen, lagging slightly behind. So what you could do with this is you could find a YouTube video, and if Spanish is your weaker language, you put in there, persona describe robo en una tienda. Who knows? You know, make a search term, look up a video, push play, and then listen and repeat. You can also use podcasts for shadowing. But the trick is to hear the language and lag behind a little bit and repeat it. You can, one of the resources for interpreting practice that I gave you has some shadowing exercises built in. You can use those as well. Another technique exercise is paraphrasing. So you would pull up, for example, an article or an editorial in an online newspaper in your weaker language, and you would read the first paragraph out loud, but you would stray a little bit from what's on the page. You would substitute one synonym per, you know, 1 or 2 synonyms per sentence. So, for example, if I were paraphrasing these instructions, read a paragraph out loud, substituting a synonym for the word on the page at the rate of 1 to 2 words per sentence, I would say, read an excerpt, not in my head, interchanging a word with the same meaning at the rate of 1 to 2 per thought, per utterance, okay? Now you can hear that the synonyms that I came up with just now aren't really precise synonyms. I was almost even explaining some of the concepts, like instead of paragraph, reading a section on the page. But what I was doing was getting visual stimuli of a message, and as it came out my mouth, I was practicing changing words out, which trains me for sight translation, and it trains me a little bit in a way for simultaneous, and it just helps with my mental and verbal agility. So it can be as short as just 5 or 6 sentences, and so you're only coming up with maybe 10 synonyms in that whole thing, but you're reading out loud, and as you read, you're coming up with these new words. That's a technique exercise. Memory work. Put on that podcast, push play, listen to someone talking, and then pause. Record yourself as you say exactly what they said, word for word, and then try to increase the length of of the amount of the utterance that you listen to, and review your work. So that's just, you hear something, push pause, you repeat it. You don't even have to switch it into your opposite language. You can just worry about repeating it. Record yourself, and then review your recording and notice, okay, did I get every last thing in? By doing that, you're training your concentration and you're training your memory, all right? So memory work, paraphrasing, shadowing. Those are good technique exercises. There's lots more, but those are great, really good starting points. Podcast, radio, YouTube, newspaper. Always prioritize your weaker language. You can do this in your stronger language as well, but if you're crunched for time, then you're going to want to spend more time on your weaker language. One resource that I really like for technique is an app called News in Slow Spanish. You can purchase a monthly subscription, and it's quite expensive. It's like $20 a month. I think that's high, personally. But you can purchase that. But they also have free content. It's just shorter. And what it is there's an announcer who's giving current events, but at a slow rate in Spanish. So if your weaker language is Spanish, this is a good source of high-level vocabulary, but used at a rate of speech that can be sometimes a little bit easier to work with for technique work. Okay, so that's called News in Slow Spanish. You can do the free version or the paid version, and it's an app for smartphones. So I highly recommend that. Okay? Reading, terminology management, technique work, finally interpreting. Okay? The resources that I would recommend you consider looking at are the Interpreter's Edge. Many interpreters have managed to prepare for and pass the certification exam by using this this book, okay? So I know $80 is high, but I also know that the terminology you'll learn in here is very complete and very helpful for learning the basics of interpreting and for getting to that passing level on the exam. So let me know if you need access to where to buy this. And there's also a few memory exercises in here, as well as a lot of shadowing exercises. Another resource is something called the Confident Interpreter. If you've been through Holly Mickelson's book cover to cover and you don't want to go back there, you can look at the Confident Interpreter. It's by a colleague of mine named Yvette. She's awesome. There are not as many lessons in the Confident Interpreter, and it was written by a couple of people, so the price is a little higher, I think, for that reason. But it's still very quality stuff, and it'll give you a new challenge. And then also, I will be posting practice exercises for you guys regularly, not necessarily every single day, but I will get exercises to you that you can use to practice your interpreting skills. Okay, within the pillar of interpreting, there are three ingredients to effective practice. Okay, the first step, the first ingredient is to perform an exercise while you record yourself. You wouldn't believe the number of interpreters that resist this step. It's easy to resist because it's kind of depressing sometimes to record yourself. You think, holy smokes, I missed so much. I'm not very good at this, But here's the thing. You can't fix what you're not aware of. So if all we do is go into the courtroom and interpret and leave, we are unaware of how complete or incomplete our work is, how accurate or inaccurate, okay? By taking the step of recording yourself on a canned interpreting exercise rather than in the real world, you create the situation where you can become aware of what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong so that you can fix whatever it is you're doing wrong and build on whatever you're doing right. So it's essential to record yourself when you do some practice work. I can't emphasize that enough. If you are telling yourself, I'll just go to court and interpret this hearing, and then I'm going to count that as my interpreting practice for my 4 pillars, it doesn't count. I have to break it to you that way. Effective practice requires an element of feedback, and the most realistic way to get feedback for us in the real world is to record ourselves and analyze our work, and then ask colleagues about specific aspects of our work that we find confusing, okay? It'd be great if we could all have a personal mentor come with us to each and every one of our hearings and step in if they hear us happen to omit something, but we just don't have that luxury. So we have to be our own critics, and the best way to do that is to hear ourselves recording, okay? Step 2 then is to use that recording to critique our own work. We need to push play on our version of this interpreted exercise while we read along with the written version of the exercise and find what terms messed us up, what we omitted, what we distorted as far as the meaning goes. Find our errors, research our terminology. After we've researched that terminology, we turn it into those flashcards that we can easily get to in our edge time during the day, and we drill it, drill it, drill it, drill it, drill it, okay? And step 4 is to redo the exercise. So I've noticed that a tendency for lots of interpreters preparing or who desperately want to pass a test at a certain level is to try to get their hands on as much material as they can, because the thinking is, I don't know what they're going to throw at me on this exam. I have to be ready for anything, so I have to cover lots and lots and lots and lots of different exercises. And there's some truth to that, but if you do not return and perfect an exercise, if you cannot perform at an 80% level of accuracy on an exercise you've heard before, how are you ever going to reach that level of accuracy or beyond on a brand new exercise that you've never heard, such as in the exam room or the courtroom? I mean, how many times do we hear the exact same thing day after day? Yeah, some of what we do in court becomes repetitive and predictable, but there's always a new, a judge who wants to say it differently, or a defendant who wants to give his life story with all sorts of strange terminology, right? So to prepare as much for the real world of interpreting as for the exam setting, we need to perfect the exercises that we're working on. We need to work them until we're at least 80% accurate, hopefully even more so. Even if we get to a point where the exercises themselves, we have them memorized, we know what they're going to say, it's still valid practice, because we're in a way, we're writing, we're giving ourselves that experience in the little computers we have in our own brains, to know how the language works and to develop ways of anticipating the message and knowing how we're going to render things in order to make ourselves more effective at interpreting. Okay? Okay. So it's a very, very, very high bar that I'm setting for us as we set out on this practice together. I'm imagining there's a little bit of a desire to kind of quit before we even get started, after I've thrown all of this information at you. Remember, my aim here is to describe what the ideal day is. And as my coach, my job is to support you wherever you fall on this scale of practice. If you have a rough week and all you do is read 10 minutes in 1 week, I'll be there and I'll cheer you on. But also part of my job is to really present what we need to be doing to you so that you can get some focus and aim high. Okay, so reading, try to aim for about 30 minutes a day, fitting it into your quiet moments via headphones and audiobooks if you have to. Terminology management, I think you can do about 10 minutes a day on that, and that can be just any time that you can sit. I've been trying to retrain myself. I've noticed that my phone is really good at getting me to open it for some particular reason and then not turn it off for 20 minutes, and after 20 minutes realize, did I even get what I needed to get off this phone? Why did I open it in the first place, So what I've been trying to do is rechannel that desire to pick up my phone for whatever reason and use it to do more productive work for my practice as an interpreter. So looking at flashcards or reading. The technique work could maybe happen in edge times or down times. Like I was saying, you could shadow something real quick before a hearing when it's quiet. You could do the reading exercise, while you're brushing, your teeth or getting ready in the morning, that sort of thing. You can kind of squeeze it in. Your interpreting practice, though, really does need to be something that you sit down and work on. So I would advise you to spend some time soul searching, schedule searching over the next couple days and figuring out how you can squeeze probably 45 minutes of actual step 1 through 4 interpreting practice into your day. Can you stay up a little bit later? Can you get up a little bit earlier? Can you use your lunch hours specifically for this a few days a week? Can you do that, 3 days a week and then take some time on the weekends to get extra studying in? It doesn't necessarily have to happen all during the work week, but if that's, that's the model that works for me so that I can have a clean, clear, relaxing weekend. But if you need to use your weekend hours to study, to implement some of this stuff, by all means do it, okay? All right. So, what's next? My job is to give you guys interpreting exercises. My job is to check in with you and say, hey, how are things going? Where are you at? What's your progress look like? And my job is to conduct these live meetings. This was a very lecture heavy meeting. For those of you that have worked with me before, you'll know that when we're in the groove with our meetings, sometimes you will interpret for me and I'll give you feedback. Sometimes I'll interpret for you and we'll talk about the terminology I used. Sometimes you will do exercises on your own time and we'll come in and talk about the terminology. So our live meetings are kind of like office hours. They're a chance for you to ask questions and they're a chance for you to get real-time feedback on what you're doing. It's intimidating to interpret in front of a bunch of colleagues, but the times that I, as an up-and-coming interpreter, have worked with a more experienced colleague and gotten their feedback have been by far the most fruitful practice sessions I've had. So I would really encourage you that if there is an opportunity in one of our live meetings to interpret, I'd encourage you to do so. We're not here to criticize, oh, can you believe she interpreted like that? No, not at all. We're here to support and encourage and help each other get to where we're wanting to be with our careers. Okay, that's my job. Your job is to aim to work those 4 pillars 5 days a week. Like I said, if you're working all 4 pillars as ideally designed, you may be working up to 2 hours a day. Okay, so I know that that's very hard to come up with, especially during a busy work week, especially with home and family demands. Just know that that's what we're aiming for. If we don't get there, we don't get there. We'll at least be having our meetings and we'll be getting closer to that ideal level than we would be otherwise. Another job is to stay active with your group, ask questions, post concerns. I will be putting resources up on Facebook. So I know we don't all have Facebook yet. I do encourage it. I know we don't love Facebook for some really good reasons. One option you can do to get around that is to use like a throwaway email account to create your Facebook account. You can delete it as soon as this experience is over with. And there are ways to set your settings so that Facebook can't get its tentacles into what you're doing on your phone or on your computer. There's a way to go into your settings and turn off Facebook tracking. So I'll send that information out for your consideration. If you still are not comfortable being on Facebook, trust me, I get it. I'll be sending as much as I can via email. You just might not get the type of interaction that you would otherwise. So you can still follow through with your job to stay active with the group and ask questions, etc. It might be a little trickier to do that without this ugly Facebook interaction thing. Okay. I really love interpreting deeply. And I also enjoy working with people who care about the profession and who want to improve their practice. So I'm excited to have the chance to work with all of you guys. I'll be hustling to make sure this is a really worthwhile experience. There was one thing I wanted to show you before it's time for me to let you get back to work. Let me see if I can find it. Oh yes, there it is. Okay. I'm gonna share. I sent this as an attachment in an email not long ago. And what it is I sometimes find, again, like I said, for me, for some reason, being able to write it down with a pen and on paper helps it stick a little bit better, all right? So This is the document I sent you. If you need it, again, let me know. It's our calendar for the next 12 weeks we'll be working together. On this calendar, you'll see our meeting times. So we'll have this live meeting. Before all of you were here, I mentioned that I'm leaving on vacation these next couple weeks, and while I still will be in touch, checking in with you, posting exercises and that kind of thing, I won't have a good enough internet connection to be able to run a live class. So we'll double up. We'll have two Monday sessions in August to make up for the weeks that I won't be around. So anyway, this attachment has our meeting times on it, but on our other days, it also has a list of these important elements or pillars of strong skills building. And I've printed this off, and when I come home from work, I come back up to this attic office that I'm in, and I get that page out and I fill out what I've accomplished in terms of strong study practice. And I would encourage you, if you think that writing things down is as effective for you as it is for me, print this out and put it somewhere and just try to track your progress daily, all right? This has Saturday on there. It gives you Sunday off, but you can, if you have to take Mondays off and do Saturdays, Sundays, you can just fill in on the other day the work that you've done, all right? All right, so that's out there. Okay, so again, 4 pillars: reading, terminology, technique work, and interpreting exercises. You can get some interpreting exercises from me, but there's also a couple of really good resources out there that you can purchase. We'll be in touch. I'll be here cheering you on, giving you feedback, suggesting terminology, sending you exercises, and you guys will be trying to cram those 4 pillars of work into your already busy lives. It'll be a busy 3 months, but I know that you guys are all conscientious professionals. Those of you who have worked with me in the past, I know that you're improving. So I have every confidence that you can continue on that path to improvement. Thank you so much for spending your lunch hour with me today. This will be recorded. I'll get it posted so that you can review it if you need to. I'll give you that slide deck and we will be in touch. All right, I'll let you all get back to work. Let me know if you have questions. We'll be in touch, okay? All right, happy weekend. Bye-bye.